Hi, welcome to Abroad Perspective, the podcast exploring life abroad from all different perspectives. I'm Moriah House. Today's episode is Spain themed because, as you might know, Spain recently won the World Cup, and I also did my cultural exchange in Spain, so I'm very excited to talk about it because it's an amazing country that is a wonderful place to do a cultural exchange. So, for the positive news today, we've all heard that speaking a second language has tons of benefits. But what about cold hard cash and career possibilities? So there's a recent article from Preply, which is slightly biased because Preply is a language learning app, but it provides this really cool overview of where in the United States and with what languages multilingual employees earn the most. So 86% of bilingual job postings mentioned Spanish as a language, so Spanish was one of the most in-demand languages, so points for Spain on that one. And also, multilingual employees as a whole earn an average of 19% more than employees who only speak one language. So that's a pretty significant difference. And 40% of multilingual employees say it helped them get their job. And adding to that, multilingual employees are 5% more likely to receive a raise than employees who only speak one language. So if you look at this article, there's a super cool map with the highest paying cities for multilingual employees across the country. But to summarize, Fremont, California pays the most for full-time multilingual employees with $67,804 on average per year. And so learning another language isn't just an incredibly rewarding experience that is going to benefit you for your whole life in social and other ways, but also it has real financial and career benefits. So that is really amazing. Today's interview is with me, your host. As I've mentioned, I did a cultural exchange program in Spain, which is what inspired me to start this podcast, and my wonderful mother has been gracious enough to interview me about it.
Hi, Moriah. I'm looking forward to learning more about your experience abroad. Why did you choose to do a cultural exchange and move abroad?
I always knew that I wanted to live abroad one day and learn another language. It was always a goal of mine growing up, and whenever I would meet people that had done cultural exchanges and lived in other countries, I found it super interesting. I always wanted to know more about it and how the experience was. So when I was graduating from college and I had the opportunity to decide what I wanted to do next, I found a cultural exchange and I decided to go for it.
Can you give us a quick overview of your exchange and where you lived?
I did NALCAP, the North American Language and Cultural Assistance Program, and I was in Galicia, Spain. I was in a city called Lugo, and I was there for almost 2 years.
Can you walk us through a typical workday for you in the NALCAP program?
Yeah, so I would typically on a work day wake up around 7 a.m., and then meet the teacher that would drive me to work. One of my schools started at 9:15, the other one started at 10:10, but for both of them I would have to meet the teachers around 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. And then I would have 4 teaching hours during the day, but I would be at the school all day because both of my schools were quite rural, which meant that there was really no way for me to get back other than riding with the teachers. And so I would have to be there all day until 4:30 to 5 p.m. typically. But the good thing about that was that I could do work at the school and go for a walk, explore the area while I didn't have to work. And they would always have lunch at the school, and it was a very nice lunch. They would have real seafood and steaks and shellfish and on real dishes and everything, so that was a really nice benefit as well. And then I would get home around 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., maybe run some errands, maybe meet some friends, then eat dinner around 8-ish and wind down, go to bed, try not to go to bed too late, and repeat the next day. And that would be 4 days a week that I would work.
Is there a local custom or habit from Spain that you still practice today?
I would say one practice that I somewhat picked up and I try to maintain from time to time today is the sobremesa, which is a word that really doesn't translate to English, but it basically is that time after a meal, especially a really nice meal where you've got lots of family and friends together, and you've all finished eating, but you're just still sitting at the table talking, enjoying that time together. Everyone's feeling satisfied and full, and you're just talking and chatting and enjoying each other's company. And that was something that I think before going to Spain would have seemed quite strange to me, because you're done eating. Why aren't you cleaning up and moving on with your life? But it's actually this really great time to connect and enjoy being in each other's company. So.
What was the most frustrating or difficult aspect of the experience?
One of the most frustrating aspects was purely navigating the bureaucracy of being in another country and getting a visa and all that stuff, because one thing about the NALCAP program is that they don't provide support with getting your visa like some programs might. And so you kind of have to do it all on your own and in a foreign language if you are not a native Spanish speaker. So that can be quite challenging, navigating those systems, and at times that would be very frustrating for me. But also when I was able to successfully do it, it was very rewarding.
I bet. How did you deal with the language barrier when you first got there, and how did that change over time?
When I first arrived in Spain, I had studied Spanish basically on my own for a few months, just listening to podcasts, doing some online activities, but I did not obviously have that much of a base of Spanish, so I definitely had to hit the ground running and try to use Google Translate, and that was a very helpful tool. And also just try to communicate with people in the best way that I could. And generally, people did speak a little bit of English, although in the area where I was, it was less common. Luckily, the family I was living with, a couple of them did speak pretty good English, so that was very helpful. And then they could help me in public with communicating. And then, of course, the people I was communicating with at school, we had the English teachers who obviously spoke English, so there was usually someone who could help me out. And then over time, I was just able to build up my skills and become more confident communicating.
What is a cultural rule or norm that you learned the hard way?
I think the biggest cultural norm that I had to learn was the hours of things and just how time works a little bit differently in Spain. I know it's a bit of a stereotype that there's the siesta and everything's late, but it is true to an extent that during that time from 2:30 to 5 in the afternoon, less things are going to be happening. It's kind of seen as rude to maybe text someone or call someone during that time. And so I had to kind of learn that. And then a lot of smaller shops will be closed. That doesn't mean people are sleeping, but they're not open. They're maybe taking their lunch break, whatever, but it's not open. And then even some grocery stores as well. And then also almost any store is going to be closed on Sunday in the area where I was. So I had to learn that and kind of plan ahead around that. And also things will be closing around 9:30, 10 p.m. It's not like in the U.S. where the grocery store will be open until 11 p.m. or midnight. And then just that perhaps if someone says that an event would start at 8:30 p.m., that would mean that maybe you get there at 8:35, 8:40 at the earliest. That's like the earliest it could possibly start, even with a class in school. If it starts at 9:15, that is the earliest it could possibly start. It probably won't really start until 9:20. So that's a little bit different than the U.S. So I had to adjust to that as well. I did spend a lot of time waiting.
What helped you finally feel at home there?
One of the most helpful things was that I was living with a host family. I was really lucky in that way. I know living with a host family can be a bit hit or miss, but my host family was super, super welcoming and always made me feel at home. And having that support network when I was living on my own in a foreign country, I am super, super grateful for. And just the network of friends in general and the English teachers, the people at my schools, I felt like everyone was super welcoming all the time. And Spanish people in general were very kind about me trying to speak in Spanish. I rarely experienced people being rude or short with me, although of course at times that's going to happen anywhere. But that in general helped me feel a lot more at home and welcome. And then as I became more confident, understood how the cultural norms were, became more confident with my Spanish, I began to feel a lot more at home.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite word or concept that you learned in Spain?
One of my favorite Spanish words is aprovechar, which basically translates to take advantage of, but I would say that it has a more positive connotation in general, and it's a bit more broad. You could say, for example, we're going to aprovechar that it's sunny and we're going to take a walk. We're going to aprovechar the leftovers from last night's dinner and make a new meal. We're going to aprovechar that you're here and we're going to have a nice conversation. Anything like that you can aprovechar, and I really like that. It has that kind of generally positive connotation of aprovechar any moment that might happen in the day, just make the best of it, kind of.
What was your favorite local food or meal from your time abroad?
There was so many amazing foods in Spain, so of course it's going to be very hard to pick. And one thing I will note is that the food in Spain is super regional. So you might think of Spain and think paella, tortilla, but it varies so much from region to region, and I was in Galicia. And so in Galicia, the most famous things are the pulpo, octopus, which is just a boiled octopus cut up with paprika, salt, and drizzle of olive oil. And then you have some potatoes and bread with it as well to soak up kind of the octopus juice, for lack of a better word. And that is incredibly delicious. That's hard to beat, so that's one of my favorites for sure. And then there was also a dish that is kind of popular all across Spain, and it is called ensaladilla rusa, Russian salad, which is kind of interesting. It's like how we call French fries, even though there's not a ton of reason behind that. And it's just this potato salad with tuna, peas, carrots, mayonnaise. You can kind of put whatever you want in it as long as it has potatoes and mayonnaise and almost always tuna. And it's really great because you just have it in your fridge, you pull it out, you pull out a scoop, you've got a meal. It's such a great summer meal, and so that was one of my favorites as well.
Is there something normal in Spain that's unthinkable in the United States, or vice versa?
One of the things that really surprised me at first, even though it's a very little thing, is that the students called the teachers by their first names. And that would be very rare in the U.S., I think. And then also that the students eat lunch at school on real plates with real forks, and they're eating, like I mentioned earlier, shellfish, salmon, little 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. That I think was pretty surprising, and I think it would be unthinkable in a lot of parts of the United States. So those were two things that definitely stood out to me, for sure. And everything being closed on Sunday, I cannot imagine. And even sometimes there would be a holiday on Monday, for example, and so everything would be closed. So you would have 2 days in a row where all the grocery stores are closed. There's maybe a 24-hour store open. At least in the city where I was, in Madrid, for example, it would be a bit different, but I feel that that would be unthinkable, that there would be all the grocery stores closed for 2 days in a row.
Did living in Spain change how you see the United States?
Yeah, definitely. I think it made me appreciate some things more about the U.S. that maybe I didn't appreciate before. For example, even one great thing about Spain is that you are living in an apartment and you can walk, usually, in, I would say the majority of people, at least where I was, were living in apartments, and you can just walk 5 minutes to the grocery store. There's bakery, there's everything right there, and you can walk everywhere. And that's really nice. But also, it did make me appreciate a bit more living in a neighborhood where you walk outside and there's not cars and grocery stores and things. You can walk around, and obviously that's not the experience of everyone in the U.S., but it made me appreciate a bit more living in a neighborhood where everyone has a yard and you can walk around and there's trees and nature and not businesses everywhere, which of course both have their pros and cons. And then it also made me appreciate a bit more perhaps the friendly customer service or friendliness in general up front of people in the United States, where you're walking by someone on the sidewalk and you smile at them, you're checking out at the grocery store, you have a little conversation. That's a lot less common in Spain, and so I think it did help me appreciate that a bit more.
Now that you're back home, what is the biggest thing you gained from living abroad?
One of the biggest thing I gained was learning Spanish. That is something that was I'm still not, I would say. It's hard to say that you're ever fluent in a language when you're learning it, at least for me, but gaining an ability where I can understand most Spanish that I hear and be able to communicate, it was a super rewarding and challenging, but also just incredibly rewarding experience and something that I really appreciate having in my life. And then another thing that I really appreciate is the connections and friends that I made in Spain that I hope to definitely stay connected with in years to come.
If someone is on the fence about moving abroad or doing a cultural exchange, what would you tell them?
I would say if you're on the fence about it, if you're thinking about it really seriously, that probably means that it is something that you're really interested in. Because if you weren't, you probably wouldn't even be thinking about it. And so if you have the opportunity and you're not going to be perhaps putting other people it's just you and you don't have a ton of other compromising factors, there's not too much risk involved, I would say just go for it because you can always come back. That's what I always told myself. Worst comes to worst, you hate it, you come back to the U.S. Yes, there's that's inexpensive, that's a hassle, maybe it feels like a waste of time, and I think it's unlikely that will happen, but you can always come back if you feel the need. And I think the regret of not having gone or not knowing what would have happened if you had gone will probably be just as big as any regret you'd have from going and it not being what you thought it might be.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
The exchange of the episode. Last episode, I talked about the English program in Korea, or EPIC, which is a great option if you're looking for a structured, relatively well-paying cultural exchange, and you're willing to get a Teaching English as a Foreign Language certification. However, if you've got your heart set on Europe and you're willing to exchange a little bit of pay and organization for cheap olive oil and world-class soccer culture, today's exchange is for you. Today, we are breaking down NALCAP, North American Language and Cultural Assistance Program, in Spain. This is the program I did, and I'm going to give you my insider tips and realistic pros and cons based on my experience. So first, where? Historically, placements are available in almost all of the 17 autonomous regions of Spain, from Madrid to Galicia to the Canary Islands. However, this year, only 12 are participating. And some of the most popular regions, Andalusia, Galicia, Madrid, Murcia, and Valencia, will not be, for reasons that I will get into shortly. But can you choose where you will be placed? When you apply on the government portal, which is called Profex, you get to select and rank your top 3 preferred regions. And the regions are grouped, so you choose one region from each group. However, it's largely first come, first serve based on your application number. So if you apply early, you have a pretty good chance of getting your first choice, but I would definitely suggest you can look up data of how many placements have historically been available in each region. And so if all your choices have very few spots, for example, Barcelona every year has very few spots, maybe 20, 30, I can't remember exactly, but if Barcelona is your top choice, unless you apply super early, that's unlikely that you're going to get that. So if all of your top choices have very few spots, you could get stuck with something random, which could be great because I think all the regions of Spain have something to offer, but it's important to keep that in mind. Now, the when. Historically, the application cycle has started in February, and then placements have been coming out in June or July. And then from there, you get your visa, which takes several months because you have to do a lot of bureaucratic stuff. You have to get a background check, get that apostilled. It involves mailing things to Washington, D.C. Then depending on where your consulate is, depending on where you live in the U.S., you're going to have to travel to the consulate for your visa appointment and then to pick up your visa. It's a lot of things that it takes a while. So that's something to keep in mind. And then you start the program in October. And however, this year, this program timeline has shifted because of delays. So placements are actually going to start in November, and then almost all of the placements end on May 31st. And then what are you going to be doing? It's 14 to 16 hours a week, depending on the region, usually spread across 4 days. For me, it was 4 days. And so that sounds like not much. That's great. 3-day weekends, everything. But I want to emphasize that it is super random. In my case, I was at the school from 9 to 4:30, 9 to 5, 4 days a week, even though I was only working 4 hours, just because of the way that transportation was and the way my hours were spread out. So that doesn't just mean you're going to drop in for 4 hours and go home, although that may be the case. And then also, not everyone does get the 3-day weekend. That can also depend on your school, so not a guarantee. However, you should not have much responsibility, no matter where you are. You're just going to be doing conversation and cultural exchange. However, some people do end up doing more work and having more responsibility than they should and being alone with the kids a lot, which is not okay. You should not be alone with the kids, although it does occasionally happen. So it's important to know the rules of the program, set boundaries, be really clear about what you are required to do and what you're not. And I think you should be good to go, and it's really not too much responsibility. Now, who can do this program? So this year you have to, for the North American Language and Cultural Assistance Program, you have to be a U.S. or Canadian citizen with a college degree from an accredited university in the U.S. or Canada. You have to be a native-like speaker of English. You have to be in good physical and mental health, which involves getting a medical certificate from your doctor. It's pretty straightforward. And then have a clean background check from the FBI. Be between the ages of 18 and 45. And then a big positive of this program for a lot of people is that there is no teaching English as a foreign language certificate requirement. So it's not competitive. So if you meet those basic requirements and you apply on time, you're basically guaranteed to get a spot. Now, the pay. The pay is probably not as great as a lot of other programs, although the big benefit, I would say, is that there's no application fee. You don't have to be paying a program for you to even apply, so that's really nice. But the pay is going to be around 800 to 1,000 euros per month, depending on the region, which hasn't really changed in the last, I think, 10 to 15 years, despite the fact that the cost of living in Spain has gone up a lot. So that's, for most people, not going to be quite enough to live on. A lot of people end up tutoring to supplement. And you should definitely come with a few $1,000s at least in savings, because you're going to have to pay to do your apartment, security deposit, all that stuff. The payments are going to be delayed. You're not going to get paid at least until the end of the first month, and some regions have been known to have a lot of payment delays historically. Galicia, the region I was in, part of the reason that I chose it was because they are known for paying on time, and I was always paid on time in my experience, but I do know of people in other regions who were not so lucky in that regard. And as I mentioned, Galicia is not an option this year, unfortunately, but hopefully it will be in years to come. Now, why should you do this program? So for me, 3 of the biggest benefits are the low barrier to entry, no application fee, it's not competitive, you don't need any teaching experience or special trainings. Second, it's a really good schedule. A lot of times, most people will get a 3-day weekend, and then you're going to already be in Spain, so that allows for a lot of travel, and that's pretty awesome. And it's really, number 3, one of the simplest ways for North Americans to spend a year or 2 in Europe with a visa and get paid to do it, even if it's not so much. And so yeah, those are the big benefits. However, now we're going to talk about, I've been mentioning throughout this overview that there's a lot of things that are different this year. And so that's what I'm going to talk about now. For a long time, NALCAP kind of operated in a legal gray area. So participants were classified as students on student visas, which meant that the schools and the governments didn't have to pay taxes for them, and the students do not have to pay taxes on their income because it's classified as a scholarship. But now the central government is suing the regional governments, saying that NALCAP participants should pay income taxes like employees. So it's all very bureaucratic and boring, and I'll try not to make it too complicated, but Spain is kind of currently reevaluating the legal framework of NALCAP. They're trying to figure out how to keep the program going, and that caused a huge delay this year, and some of the most popular regions won't be participating. So it's a really good reminder that when you do a government-sponsored program like this, you are going to be even more at the mercy of bureaucracy and things that you really cannot control. Whereas maybe if you pay to do a private program, you might have a bit more of a guarantee. Definitely pros and cons to both. So that's an overview of the NALCAP program. I had a very positive experience from my perspective, and I'll put links in the show notes and you can do your own research from there. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with our next episode.